Good morning, Bitcoiners. I hope you're doing well. I'm loving my life. Who could complain? Chris, the sun is indeed up. We love it. John, good morning, John. Christine, good morning. Hope you're doing well, Christine. Suntech struggling, but Snowtech is on the way here in New Hampshire. Good morning. Yeah, Suntech a little weak today, huh? A little weak up there. I saw the weather. Good morning from Minnesota. Coffee is on. Sun is coming up. A great day to work on Bitcoin. We love it, Lightning Vend. Good morning, all. Sean recommends Beaumatin. Good morning, Bitcoiners. B for victory. Good morning, Breakup Bitcoiners, says Hoddle T. Washington. Good morning. How you doing, Defina? Life's great, man. Can't complain. Hassan, good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Just check the debt clock. We're at 34.2 trillion now. No problem. But still, I want back my tax refund this year to Ukraine. My Israel and yeah, that's what's going on, Muslim Bitcoiner. Good morning. Sun is up and chainsaw is running. That's the if you guys don't know what Motosiera is, that's the famous slogan from Millet. Motosiera, chainsaw. Robert, good morning. Moscow time on. We're getting to the Moscow time. We're almost there. Muslim Bitcoiner, my border crossing homies back home. Indeed. My border crossing homies. Good morning, Breakup Gang. Guten Tag, Andy. Hello, pal. Hello, my name is. Good morning, pals. Hastacha, Doc Blockchain. Indeed. Good morning and good day, Zappa BTC. So let's acknowledge, right? As many people have said, some places the sun is not so strong, sun tech not operational. On the other side of the planet, you got to trust us, right? The sun, not quite the same confirmation level as Bitcoin, right? You do have to trust people on the other side of the planet, right? So it's got a little bit of a disadvantage over a Bitcoin, but that's fine, right? That's fine. Bitcoin running all around the world right now. You can check it anywhere. So all that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. So I'm glad you're trusting me. The sun is up here on the Atlantic coast. It's true. It's happening. It's happening. But let's talk about some fake news, right? What's the fakest news I could find today? Well, I got some good ones. Washington Post writes, Kelce, okay, this is a Travis Kelce one. No comment needed. All right, watch this. It's good. It's a really good one. Kelce, by the way, this is not a comment, but I just got to admit, I'd never heard of Travis Kelce before this year. All right, just so you know. Kelce, the 34-year-old tight end with a luxuriant beard, makes the Chiefs the closest thing. So remember, it's Kelce who does this, right? Kelce, the 34-year-old tight end with a luxuriant beard, makes the Chiefs the closest thing this century to Michael Jordan's Bulls. This Kelce he's basically Jordan, guys. He's Jordan. He's Michael Jordan. I grew up around Michael Jordan. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same, right? Who could tell? Who's out there telling the difference between Travis Kelce and Michael Jordan? It's the same person. Who couldn't tell their dominance apart, right? This one's good. Intelligencer, right? We're tracking Bill Ackman, Moscow time right now. This is our Bill Ackman section. What did we say? We said there was going to be a steady stream of Bill Ackman Moscow time, and here we go. This one's good, though. I admire the headline in this one. Raging Bill. It's pretty good, huh? Raging Bill. So it's in The Money Game. The Money Game, Raging Bill. Bill Ackman's fight against Harvard has made him the public face of a billionaire class anxious it no longer rules the world. The billionaire class no longer runs the world, apparently. So good. So good. Of course, it's it's Reeves Weidman from the New York Magazine. He knows who runs the world. He runs for New York Magazine. Everyone knows that magazine. It's as popular as Travis Kelce. It's the same thing, right? This one's good. Washington Post. Washington Post never fails, right? Whether they're taping layoffs or documenting their job searches, Gen Z and younger millennials are bringing candor. They're bringing candor, guys, to joblessness. Okay, way to go, Gen Z. You're bringing candor to joblessness. Come on, let's give Gen Z a hand. You're bringing candor. It's cool, man. Way to go, guys. Bringing candor. This one's great. So New York Times, not going so well in their coverage of Ukraine, and they're trying to come up with some angles here. This is what they got. Short on soldiers, Ukraine debates how to find the next wave of troops. A potential expansion of the nation's military draft to replenish the exhausted, battered army has become an emotional, politically charged issue. Oh, what a surprise. Thanks, New York Times. I never would have guessed that kidnapping people to go fight at the front line would become emotionally charged. But thanks to the New York Times, my ignorance has been alleviated. Thank you. It's amazing. Oh, now we're going to do some of our Biden is totally fine fake news articles, right? It's going to be a section, right? It's a special section of Moscow time. So here we go. New York Times. I'm a neuroscientist. We're thinking about Biden's memory and age the wrong way. All right. So the neuroscientist knows that just because you can't remember things doesn't mean you have memory problems. Duh. You got to go be a neuroscientist to know that. Idiots. This one's good too. New York Times. Memory loss requires careful diagnosis, scientists say, right? It requires a careful diagnosis. Okay. Remember that. So the New York Times is telling you here in their headline, I got to read it twice because the next headline's important. I'll read it one more time. The full thing, there's two headlines. The New York Times, memory loss requires careful diagnosis, scientists say. A federal investigator said that President Biden had poor memory and diminished faculties. But such a diagnosis would require close medical assessment, experts said. Okay, so let's turn the page. This is an old Moscow time one, right? New York Times also, okay, we're also in the New York Times letter. Trump is mentally unfit. No exam needed. 3 mental health professionals who contributed to the dangerous case of Donald Trump cite recent actions that confirm their worries. No exam needed, guys. Don't worry about it. Right? It's true. It's true. Trump can go on for hours and hours and hours every day. No script, just having fun, but it could be rambly, it could be rambly. So he provides enough content for him to be apparently diagnosed from afar. That's the difference, right? We never hear from Biden. That must be it, right? You need a little more info. We got a few more Trump ones here. This is great. So the NATO one where he's like, I want Russia to attack, right? And I'm not going to pay unless they pay. I'm not helping them, which is funny, right? It's funny. Trump and his NATO thing. But the folks here are taking it very seriously. All right. The Associated Press, NATO leader says Trump puts allies at risk by saying Russia can do whatever the hell they want. They're going to keep doing these ones, by the way. Right. This is the new hoax. Right. So this is the new hoax that Trump is just waiting. Trump wants Russia to attack Europe because it's good for his polls. You're going to hear more of those, right? So good. This one is my favorite of the day, though. All right. This one is really like a new kind of Moscow time. I haven't seen this particular genre before, this particular kind, but it's excellent, right? So MSNBC, just watch the beauty of this one, right? It's also been published on NBC News. It's kind of here and there. You can find it. Are you ready? Special counsel warns of immediate threat to Mar-a-Lago case witnesses. So what they're saying here is like Trump's got a hit. He's going to go kill the witnesses to the boxes hoax. It's so good. Immediate threat. Oh, gosh. And we got one more. It's from Phil Bump, right? It's from Phil Bump. Thank you, Phil. Washington Post, by rewriting the history of Trump's his first impeachment, Senator J.D. Vance tries to gin up anger against a funding bill. He's trying to gin up anger, guys, because like everyone's so cool about Ukraine. You got to gin up the anger, right? We love it. We're having a great time. We would be so for all of it if it wasn't for the ginning up of the anger, Phil. So what he was referring to is a thing that J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio, noticed. And the senator from Ohio, J.D. Vance, a seed round investor in Rumble. Many people think he's a Bitcoiner behind the scenes. I'm of that opinion. I've been soliciting his presence at Bitcoin shows for a couple of years now. He's a senator class of 2022 Senate midterms. But he was relevant before already. So what he found was that in the recent Senate bill that passed last night to fund Ukraine and Israel, and they stripped out all the American border stuff, so it's just straight up Ukraine. It passed Senate. Apparently, it's dead on arrival in the House. Apparently, Speaker Johnson's not even going to pick it up. It's not even going to hit the floor, so it's dead as it is. You had Mitt Romney saying it's the most important vote of all time, and the Republicans won't even pick it up in the House. So Mitt, you're done. So what happened is J.D. Vance pointed this out, that there was a poison pill in the bill. A poison pill being something, well, poison pill, it's the wrong way to describe it. Poison pill would be to not pass legislation. What's in there is a carryover funding for Ukraine. And what people are reminding us here is that Trump, of course, if you remember the first time he got impeached, not the January 6th impeachment, the original impeachment, which happened in January 2020. And it was about the perfect phone call to Zelensky. And so he called up Zelensky and said, find out what's going on with the Bidens, or I won't give you this money. Right. That's what he said. I won't give you the money. And then everyone said quid pro quo. Right. You can't do that. When I continue to believe that's exactly the president's job. Right. If you're giving money to people and they're not doing what you need. And in this case, it was about election integrity. So I think that's the president's job. Right. So anyway, we won't go over. We won't go over the first impeachment too much. But what happened was he wouldn't send the money, which they said was treason, right? That's what got him impeached. And J.D. Vance is pointing out that the same bill has this carryover thing that Trump gets locked into funding Ukraine even if he wins. So it's this thing that is sort of election proof of funding. When I say election proof, I don't mean proof as in proof of work. I mean as in it cannot affect the outcome. So the money being sent would be elections proof. So even Trump getting elected wouldn't change it. And if Trump tried to change it, it would cause impeachment again, right? So J.D. Vance picking that up. And they did a Spaces last night with David Sachs and J.D. Vance, and Vivek Ramaswamy showed up. Elon Musk showed up. All kinds of people joined this David Sachs space. And Vivek also tweeted his summary of it. He goes, here's the game, and many Republicans are falling for the trap. In 2019, they impeached Trump for withholding Ukraine funding over the objection of career experts. That's the one where, what's his name? Vindeman. When's he getting his dick cut and his tits put in? I wonder. I'm curious. The current Ukraine bill sends money to the exact same DoD fund, and the same career experts will support spending it. If Trump tries to pause that funding war to negotiate an end to the Ukraine war, they'll use this toxic funding bill as leverage to impeach again. Shame on every Republican who votes for this bill. They'll be responsible for the outcome when it happens. And then, people were talking about it. So David Sachs, Mike Lee, we're all talking about the Boris Johnson thing over there too, and how his lie was just so obvious, right? He had to attack Tucker's character. He couldn't just deny it himself. So that was out there. But here's the thing, right? So if you think about the prediction that Vivek made here, that this will come back to haunt. This will come back to haunt Republicans. It'll come back to haunt Trump. I think he's right on. He went a little further, though, and he offered this framing for what's going on in Ukraine that I thought was really clever and different and, totally relevant to what we're doing. So he came out and said that, let me just get my notes. He put it in terms of return on investment, right? This return on investment thing. And he said, many Republicans and folks are looking at it in terms of, well, we give this money and what are we getting back? Right. So what are we getting back? Some people say, oh, it's a wash, right? We get a bit of security and this and that. He said, actually, this is a completely ridiculous frame. The whole Ukraine thing is a net negative in the sense that it's affecting America's reputation, capacity abroad. Every day they try to weaken Russia. It doesn't work out. Russia's figured out its supply chains. They're getting strengthened. And it looks like the opposite has happened, that America is getting weaker by doing this. And he's said in this Spaces last night that not enough people are understanding that this is a net negative and a drawdown for America, that this is actually weakening America more than anything we've done in recent memory. And he mentioned, okay, if the goal is regime change in Russia, well, how do you know it's going to be better next time, right? At least with Putin, he's talking about peace, but if they get radicalized from losing this war, do you think the next one's going to be better than Putin, or is it going to be even more hostile towards America and Ukraine and things like that? So he's saying we can't tell the difference to that, and it can't be controlled. You can't figure that on our own. So he's saying that the other effects of daily strengthening the ties between China and Russia also has this negative effect, right? So this, combination of China and Russia continues to be a much more clear and present danger for the American military or any desire to continue to control outcomes abroad, right? That it's not really going to hold and it's not sustainable. So here's what I thought about all of these things and the net negative and how the Ukraine war really does mesh with what's going on in American politics. And I think I've done a bit of a predictive analysis here, and I'll share it with you. Remember I toyed with the idea of writing a 2024 Outlook book, a little bit based on Wizard of Oz. It didn't really come together. It's not really popping off the page, but I still have a lot of material, and I'm still trying to find a way to publish this stuff and add more stuff to it and make it relevant. So I think what I've got now, and I've drafted it in the past few days, is a Bitcoiner's guide to the 2024 elections. And the way I divided it right now, anyway, is between first the people, the players, right? So who's involved, who are the people, and then the policies. So it's a P2P situation, right? So people, policies, and then predictions. So if you put the people on the board and then you put the policies on the board in a certain order, you can actually see that the people involved with these policies create a situation where it's very easy to track and make predictions on how almost everything will change as a result of the 2024 elections. So here's what I got so far, right? So who are the people that I would profile, that I have these sort of small profiles? Who are just the people, right? That's the foundation, right? The people of 2024, the policies, and then the predictions. So the people I have in my list, and I don't think you need really more than this, right? There might be more out there, but I think the main characters of World War III and for what we see right now in the US elections are the following. We got RFK Jr., right? I don't think there's any denying he's a major player in the 2024 election. I've argued many times only his vote counts. Only RFK votes this year, right? Because he's a third-party candidate controlling over 20% of the vote. So whatever he does determines the winner in some ways. So he determines the winner. So only his vote counts. That's an argument I've made for a while now. Now, I don't know if the math quite checks out, but that's sort of one shorthand way of understanding his role. Even if he doesn't have the numbers to win, he has the kingmaker capacity to decide who wins. So very powerful, right? Of course, I put Vivek there, right? Vivek is one of the important 2024 characters. We've already seen it. It looks like he's going to be the vice presidential candidate. I think seeing him at Mar-a-Lago with his wife and with Melania this weekend, the two couples, was sort of a test run to see if they can roll together. It looked great. I mean, they looked like a really awesome foursome there. So I think it's a done deal. I think he's going to be the vice presidential candidate, which brings all of his policy preferences to the forefront, particularly his understanding of CBDCs, which I argued from the beginning. Remember that him being in the orbit of Trump would actually affect Trump's policy preferences. And we already saw it on CBDCs. Trump never spoke about CBDCs in his life, thanked Vivek for teaching him about CBDCs, and is starting to hammer against it and has promised we'll never have one, right? So that's a major thing. Of course, Joe Biden is one of them, and I'd put Hunter with him, right? Now, they do have a little bit of experience with the art for real, right? You got to love Hunter's art. It's honestly, I've been a fan from the beginning. Not the art itself is fine. I don't think he's doing it. What a coincidence. He's a good artist, right? So I don't think he's actually doing the art. I don't think we've ever seen proof of him doing it. I don't know if he's doing it. It would surprise me if he is. But what's the resale on his art, right? What's the resale? All right, it's zero, of course. The initial buy of the art is just to launder the money and buy the influence. But there's no resale to it. The person buying it is not reselling it for what they bought it for, right? It's who is selling it, in this case, Hunter Biden, that makes it valuable. But nevertheless, you got to use the Hunter and the Joe thing because they're a big part of the story, and the money laundering thing is right on for us. We love it, right? So, and then of course, Trump is, who could deny Trump is perhaps the most important character of the 2024 elections. I would argue that both RFK and Vivek have the opportunity to downsize the importance of Trump in this 2024 election, or at least share the mind space that they create out of it. But nevertheless, it's there, right? So none of this is rocket science, right? I'm just giving you a sense of who the characters. I put Greg Abbott in there, the governor of Texas, but not quite sure yet. I do also want to put Milei and Nayib Bukele if I do get into some foreign characters, but it's not really necessary because I want to keep it pretty tight on U.S. policy. But there you go. These are the characters, right? I could sort of describe what Bitcoin relationships they have and all that stuff, but that comes later in the policy. So the policies that I have, and this is what's important, right? So first of all, I have foreign policy at the top of the list. So that would be Ukraine. But really, the implications for the foreign policy thing, for a second, forget all about funding and the war and all of that stuff. That's less relevant to the domestic election story. What's relevant there is the BRICS piece, right? It's the foreign policy that's related to money. It's a huge thing, right? And people don't always realize that Ukraine is directly responsible for the BRICS movement. So Bitcoin has a direct stake, let's say, in Ukraine, in the sense that it's provoked the BRICS story and the BRICS narrative and the impetus for joining BRICS and the breaking of the monopoly market of Bitcoin and of dollars and oil. So this is a huge difference, right? So now that BRICS is there as a policy matter, that's how it's relevant to Bitcoin, and that's how Ukraine becomes instantly relevant to Bitcoin and domestic policy. Now, and it's a big thing, right? Because I always had a belief that when Satoshi first launched Bitcoin in 2008, I was living in Japan at the time. I was working as a lawyer there, and that financial crisis, the environment that it was released in, I've argued for a long time that the name Satoshi Nakamoto, taking the Japanese pseudonym, was in order to say to America after the financial crisis, after 2008, that the things you did to get out of the financial crisis, the things you must do to get out of the financial crisis and preserve the world order that the US dollar had established since World War II, the things you'll need to do that will make it so that you can't do it in the future, right? What I mean is, the costs of maintaining the 2008 world will cost the 2008 world. And Satoshi was suggesting that America was becoming Japan in this way, right? What I mean is their dexterity to manipulate interest rates and money supply was gone because the global demand for US treasuries and US debt would start winding down. It wasn't instant, but it would happen over time. And that everything done in 08 set a clock for the extinguishing of the fire that kept perpetuating the US dollar as the global reserve currency. So I've always argued that the Japanese pseudonym came from having the moral or personal authority to say to America, you are Japan. Now, if you go back to that environment, what is your prediction, right? If there's no Bitcoin and you see America having lit the fuse that will destroy its ability to manage the global economy from its own domestic policy, what would be your natural guess about who would take over? It was China, of course, right? Everyone, that was an easy guess, right? China would become the new global reserve currency, the new empire, if we kept on the same trajectory of nation states and nations as issuing debt as the form of money that everyone agrees is money. So Bitcoin entered that environment in order to break that flow, right? It's sort of a way to get off of that. It's an off ramp from the inevitable after '08, which I argue Satoshi believed was inevitable, that China was going to take over. So the only answer was to more or less undercut the very concept of fiat currency in order to avoid China replacing it, right? In order to avoid China replacing the US dollar, there was only one solution. And the solution was destroy them all and separate money and state forever. Now, where we're at, it looks like we're right on the target that Satoshi had, right? America doesn't look like it's going to be able to hold its position. All these other countries are saying we're going to settle oil and this and that. US dollar is not going to be the main thing. Demand for US treasuries is coming way down. But here's where the BRICS thing enters the domestic energy policy, right? So as BRICS continues to create this demand, as other countries are developing their energy resources, selling them for different money, America and the desire for other countries to manipulate the American currency to keep energy exports from America low, or to keep American consumption capacity high so that they can continue to sell things produced abroad, that whole world stops making sense, right? It stops making sense for these folks to want America to be the main consumer. Anyone in the world can be their main consumer after that. And it really does alter the math and the logic of globalism as we've known it based on the US dollar. So it's a huge, huge change, right? And the most important factor within that change domestically in America will be energy policies. So imagine that BRICS and America's own domestic policy. So now we can't manipulate the rest of the world. The one thing America has left to manipulate that could save it is its own energy. And it still has a ton, right? So America suddenly has to have a super robust domestic energy policy. That's why the Texas thing becomes so relevant. So imagine that we go from this, here, these are the players. The policies begin with BRICS. They move into energy policy. But now here's where it gets really fun, right? The thing that ties energy policy and BRICS together and then moves more into domestic personal policy matters is the CBDC, right? So imagine you get these fake Chinese money that are, and all these other fiat CBDCs that are coming out, and they're all vying for this spot where the US dollar once had as the only and sole market for oil in the world. And now these other things are coming in, but they're all attached with spy tech and all this kind of stuff, right? And they don't really offer the same kind of anonymity, or they don't offer the same kind of flexibility, let's say, and they're totally captured by domestic policymakers and things like that. So you're creating a void from rich energy companies who now have choices to make about which system they'd rather go with. And it's what I've been saying for a long time. The Chinese one is not that shitcoin. If they even come up with a BRICS shitcoin for energy and oil, that ain't going to hunt. That's not going to work. So no one's going to give it any credibility. Who are we going to give credibility here to issue money? Russia? Brazil? None of these people can do the job, right? None of these people will be able to adhere to any form of Lindy being the length of time a thing has survived, predicts how long it can survive for. So every day Bitcoin lives, it becomes stronger, and its capacity to live longer is more and more confirmed. So in this case, you're literally going to have upstart shitcoins from shit countries filled with experts trying to tell everyone in the world that this is the new reference, but it ain't going to work. So suddenly in America ourselves, where we have all this Missouri versus Joe Biden and all these cases, energy policy and the war in Ukraine meet weirdly on the banking issue and CBDCs. And you can even see this manifesting in other places. Just look at the draft that we were laughing about in Ukraine, right? What they're doing is the Americans put a CBDC in there that allows the entire country to, through one app, control the banking of the individuals, the people. And if someone dodges the draft, they shut their banking off in Ukraine. And now Ukraine was already a weird little island of banking. They're not plugged into Swift. They're not plugged into, or at least when I was working at Kraken on the bank side, looking into correspondent banking relationships, Ukraine was an anomaly. We noticed they had the highest Bitcoin usage back in 2020, right? Because already in 2020, Ukrainians were using Bitcoin at like 10 to 20% of the population, right? It was very high. Now, the reason it was very high was not because everyone there was so clever and they saw the future. It was nothing like that. It was because they were so full of criminals and corruption that even the basic European system wouldn't allow the bank cards from Ukraine to work in any other European bank. They wouldn't work anywhere in the world. They were literally cut off from banking, right? They needed to start bank accounts in other countries and things like that. That's what made it easy for the Americans to come in and impose this new system, because there was no connections to anything else. It does make you wonder if this was something they had in mind for years, because the degree to which their banking system had been segregated can be explained by the corruption in the country. It can. But it was strange anyway. They were a sitting duck banking wise compared to everyone else in the world. So their bank cards simply were cut off and they only work domestically. Romania is the other country that's like that, but they're not. I don't know what's going on. They weren't into Bitcoin years ago, or at least we couldn't figure it out. If they were, we didn't see much flows going in there. There was nothing happening, right? So I did all this work before there's any geopolitical stuff. It was like, is Ukraine a viable market for us to offer services as Kraken at the time? And we're like, well, the corruption is bad. I get why everyone is debanked from there. Now, it doesn't really hurt us because Bitcoin is final settlement and it's not that complicated. But nevertheless, they were a separate instance altogether. So that's how their CBDC and their little finance app became so powerful and became engaged to help them manifest this draft. So the draft itself is one of the most horrendous things you'll ever see. Rich people ran out. You've got Cernovich talking about it here. He says, did you know 650,000 Ukrainian men fled the country as they didn't see the point of the war. Regime officials have to kidnap men left in Ukraine, so no one wants to fight. The average age of a soldier is nearly 50. An entire generation of young men was sent to slaughter. Now, I've even seen some of these videos where there's like a mentally handicapped person that they drafted. They've got like actual retards in the trenches and they're teasing them. Like it's some of the most horrendous stuff you'll ever come across. I don't know how real it is, but it's awful. Like it makes you absolutely sick to your stomach. They play pranks like on they're upset. Now, look, I've never been in hot conflict war. I've read books about it. It's not something I'm interested in. I have a lot of sympathy for anyone who ended up at that line. So I'm not trying to say this person is evil or anything, but the people teasing this handicapped person, I don't also want to think they're innocent about much, but I can get, if you're sitting at the front lines and the people who are sending you reinforcements send you mentally ill, handicapped people who couldn't fire a gun or hold a gun if they wanted to. And I mean, I'm serious. They're that messed, like they're more like extreme Down syndrome people, right? Extreme, like not capable of fighting. They'll play pranks, boom, and the guy will hide because they're shell shocked before they even get there, right? Drooling on themselves. So I don't know if they could have been fake news. It could have been anything, right? I don't know the answer to that. It could have been Russian. I can't tell the difference between Russian and Ukrainian, right? I don't know the difference. I was told in a tweet it was Ukrainian, but I could be wrong. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if Russian people did the same or anyone did the same, right? I'm not saying this is a unique evil of Ukraine, but nevertheless, the CBDC and the draft over there and conscription over there can be now easily understood by Americans, and it can be easily understood in the context of financial surveillance and really the lack of privacy, and really, in the end, the lack of First Amendment rights. We don't really have a tremendous privacy protection in America, right? I'm still not of the belief that privacy is going to be our main impetus and vector that pushes Bitcoin over the edge. I continue to think it's macro energy. I see too many people give away their privacy for nothing. I don't get, I get it. The orb and the eye, my eye gets scanned every time I turn my fucking iPhone on. So I don't understand, I would prefer a world where privacy was around, but it's too difficult. I'm terrible at it. I can pretend I'm good at it, right? But I'm exposed all over the place. I've done all these tests and pen tests, and you can't get it right? There's no winning that game. So it's not something that I worry about too much, simply because it's another era where I think we solve privacy. Right now, we're stuck on monetary policy, which is a totally different thing. And freedom of speech, to me anyway, and I could be wrong, but to me, freedom of speech is more important than privacy. Because the reason why we get into these situations in the first place is not because we didn't get to keep a secret. It's because we can't say the truth. They're not the same thing, right? So Bitcoin is more powerful on the freedom of speech vector than it is on the privacy vector. That's what I think. And I've believed that for a while. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But now that we're more and more aware of the degree to which we can be censored, the degree to which we can be manipulated, the degree to which the bureaucrats or institutions or these third-party censors, this business model censorship thing that's been set up that Mike Benz talks about all the time. He gives an example here with the disinformation dashboard. This is another Foundation for Freedom Online, a nonprofit created by Congress, had its disinformation dashboard trained on stopping Hunter Biden laptop narratives in 2020. This censorship tool called Junkipedia is also building up a vast database of banned narratives. So this isn't about privacy, right? This isn't about privacy at all. This is about the ability to astroturf an argument, the ability to conduct psychological operations, to hypnotize people, to persuade them. It's not the same as privacy, right? And Mike Benz brings out this point that the business model around this censorship, around all of these third-party experts and all that, is what allows this to take place. And here's where the CBDC and where I think the policies start to really coalesce, right? So go from, again, right, the characters, the players that I just mentioned, it's Vivek, RFK, Trump, Biden, maybe Greg Abbott, and then the policies being BRICS, energy, CBDCs, they kind of flow together, right? BRICS, energy, CBDCs with these characters. So the plan for the way I've written the book is, here's the characters. It's almost like a baseball card. Like, these are their strengths. This is what they do. This is what they're good at. Then you go into the policies and say how they are playing to these policies, how they can affect whether these policies come true or not, whether they are realized or not. So, and then from there, you can actually make predictions. Like, once you put the people and the policies together, you can start saying where things are headed. And so go back to the CBDCs and the brainwashing as a business model and persuasion, and relate it to energy, relate it to BRICS. And then you start to see that these third-party psychopaths, these Freedom Foundation for Freedom Online, and all these third-party entities that would brainwash you, that would do these things, they're the ones that end up getting exposed when you start tracking this logic. So all this to say, if you take energy, if you take our CBDC piece and you put them together, and then you put people like Trump and Vivek and RFK against Biden, right? and you think about energy policy and you put Greg Abbott in there too. And then you start having a scenario where the chainsaw, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Motosiera, as they said in Argentina, becomes part of the 2024 campaign. And what was Motosiera in Argentina? It was chainsaw the government into pieces, cut the fucker up, right? That's why he would go around with the chainsaw, right? So here we're going to have a situation where the appetite to liquidate Washington, D.C. and chop it into bits will never be higher. It'll never be higher. And you're going to get people, capable people who are going to get up there and they're going to argue that Chevron, that the blackmail going on in Washington, D.C., Chevron being the deference paid to all of these third-party institutions when they come up with policy, federal entities, unelected entities when they come up with policy. This is being challenged at the Supreme Court. We've got the SEC versus Jarkissi case. I've mentioned that to you many, many times. This would invalidate all enforcement action that comes out of executive branch institutions. So the SEC loses its enforcement, loses its judges, loses all of its capacity to push and bully Wall Street. That'll be gone. I don't think that makes it to the election, right? So Motosiera is going to become one of the most important ideas in the 2024 election. It's going to be, and if you go back to what I said about energy, and you go back to what I've been saying about Texas, right? Texas, in order to de-risk itself from all of this federal stuff, is going to issue a coin backed by its energy. They're going to issue a Texas dollar. And it's going to be backed by the energy of Texas. And that energy of Texas is going to have Bitcoin baked into it. And which it already is. It's already too late for that. So Bitcoin is going to end up in the Texas minting of money. And it's going to be a big part of states' rights that are going to have an effect in destroying the US federal government in DC. Now, you're still going to have a Congress, you're still going to have a Senate, you're still going to have some pieces. You can still have an SEC, but they can just write rules. They can't enforce them. That's it. They can just write the rules. Now, if the rules are not legible by a normal court, then the rule is stupid and thrown out, the way it always should have been. Not the way it is now, which is if they write a rule, it's their own neighbor across the hallway who's enforcing the rule, and they just tell them, well, this is what I actually meant, do it this way. And all that inside baseball that leaves everyone on the outside and allows the whole industry to be captured, because that same SEC guy is just going to go get a job on Wall Street next and then come back and back and back and back. Vivek is going to destroy that along with Trump and all these other guys, and you're going to see the chainsaw come, right? So we have a movie in America called Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's what it's going to turn into. It's going to be Money's Texas Motosiera Massacre. And then from there, you're going to end up getting two of the more important election issues that come out of that, right? So I think that the conversation from BRICS, which flows directly from Ukraine, heads to the energy policy where you're going to have states telling the federal government to fuck off. And then it's going to bring back the whole financial component of the CBDC and Ukraine and the draft and what's possible and the Canadian truckers. And from there, you're going to have the case to destroy the federal government. And when you have the case to destroy the federal government, and that's what they're running on, they're going to run. That's what Millet ran on. He ran on chainsawing this thing, not, I have a better idea. No. He came in and said, I'm going to fucking kill them all. I'm going to destroy it, right? So that's what we're going to get. We're going to get that in America. It's not Argentina, right? America. And that can end up changing the governance models of the entire world, And the net result of it is going to be two things, right? Because we're going to have to start over, right? So many things are going to have to be reinvented as we destroy everything, which is why it's so amazing that Trump has an actual Citadel policy, right? So my great desire for the Trump-Vivek presidency is that Trump chills the fuck out a little bit. I don't want him involved, like doing shrinkflation videos. I don't want him talking about this policy and that, none of that, right? Trump needs to chill out and be king and work on cities, right? Fix DC. Did you hear what Tucker said yesterday? How radicalizing it is for Americans right now to go abroad and see well-run cities like Moscow and Singapore and Tokyo and Seoul and you name it, right? Dubai, Abu Dhabi. I'll be going to Qatar soon, Doha, right? I go to Doha. I'm going to Hong Kong, which is a shithole. But that's fine. I love Hong Kong. But the point here being that American cities are shit. They're complete and total shit now. I've told this story a few times on the show. The not last time, maybe in 2018, I was on my way to Singapore and with some New York friends, and they had never been, right? And this one New York friend of mine says, Nolan, I went to my doctor yesterday, and the doctor told me I need to get a shot before I go to Singapore. And I started laughing. I said, do you take the subway here in New York City to work? And he says, yeah, I do. And I said, well, you're from the third world. You live in the third world. You live in the 19th century, a third world shithole out of the 19th century. You're going to the first world. You're going to the developed world. It's not the other way around. People coming from the developing world don't take shots when they go to the developed world. That's not how it works, right? And he couldn't understand what I was saying at first. I said, you live in a shithole and you're going to a beautiful, clean place. Okay. And then he was like, really? And I was like, yeah. And then he got there. Have you guys ever seen the airport in Singapore? Do you know what you're talking about here when you arrive at the airport in Singapore and you think about where we come from in America? The airport in Singapore, all right? Forget about the ones that have been there forever. Let me just tell you how amazing this airport is. First of all, no security. There's no like security wall to get into the airport. Nothing like that, right? You check your bags and then the whole thing is like a mall. You just walk around. You're done. You're done. There's no more checks. You just walk around. Every gate for every airplane where the airplane is parked on the thing, every gate is glassed in and every gate has its own baggage scanner. So all you have to do is find your gate. And when you pass through that threshold, you can't come back out, right? You're in the room. You're in the glassed in. Each gate has a glassed in room. Much better. And then you board from there. So to get into the glassed room, every gate has its own baggage scanner and everything like that. So that's it. You just walk around the airport, you put your bag on the scanner, and you walk in the fucking gate. You're done. But that's like the old airport thing. That's not even the good part. They ended up building a rainforest, okay? And I can't even understand how they engineered it. A waterfall falls from the middle of the roof, all right? And there's about 8 miles of trails around this rainforest in a dome. That's in the air, but it's free. It's the coolest place you've ever been in your life. And it's just a place to get some exercise at the airport. That's it. There's no commercial purpose. There's no entry fee, nothing, right? And it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. I can't believe it's real. Qatar, where I'm going, has a similar thing in the airport. So this Freedom City thing that Trump talks about, right? And when he talks about making DC livable again, you even had Elon yesterday saying, we need new subways in America. Like the subways are terrible. A bunch of people dead yesterday in Bronx on the subway, shooting, fighting, all the crazy shit, right? So, I was a long time user of the New York subway. I use it all the time, right? You have to. In New York, the traffic is so bad, rich and poor have to take the subway because at least when I lived there, I think I would avoid it now. Sometimes I would take a lot of car services and things like that. But, when that city is so gridlocked and filled with traffic, what are you going to do? You jump in, you go, right? You can get downtown. It was awesome. I would get from Midtown. I would have to do a lot of TV hits. They always sent a driver, like the big Yukon. But sometimes it was like, hey, can you come in 25 minutes, right? And I'd be in Midtown up by Central Park. And the stock exchange, which is a TV studio, would be down in FIDA. You can make it in 15 minutes from Midtown down to downtown on Wall Street if you take a subway. I mean, it gets you where you're going, right? That's cool. But it stinks. It's slow. It's shitty. It's crowded. It's filled with filthy things, right? It's not even close to the subway in Singapore. Now I get it. The stupid Singapore one, you can't chew gum. If you chew gum, they'll beat you with a cane and all that stuff. That's all true, right? But it works. The stupid thing works. So the Citadel thing is going to be a huge deal. Trump's Freedom Cities. And it's going to, again, make an opportunity for Bitcoiners to add expertise because we get Citadel tech. Like, we get it, right? We've been thinking about Citadels for a long time. Finally, the other issue that I'll have in my story is on elections. I'll add a little more of that another time. You guys know what I've said about that a billion times, is that Bitcoiners, and this was what I'll put in the Bitcoiners Guide to U.S. elections 2024, is that we have a major, and it sort of brings it back to square one. Bitcoiners have a major role in the elections. I was talking with Walter Kern yesterday, getting Matt Taibbi and Walter Kern at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee, July 25th to 27th. You can use my promo code SpaceDrop if you want to get a ticket. So SpaceDrop is my promo code. I got to remember to put it in the description. I have the links and I've forgotten to do it all week so far. So it'll be there tomorrow. From now on, you'll be getting those promo codes, and you can buy both the Nashville and Hong Kong tickets with the discount from SpaceDrop. So there you go. So the election piece, which will be in the book, the guidebook, is built around this idea that Bitcoiners, in making our decision to base our financial health around Bitcoin, understood the trade-offs between Bitcoin and other shitcoins, obviously. And the trade-offs being that Bitcoin, from an engineering sense, understands that credibility counts more than convenience, right? Speed of transactions is a stupid goal. It doesn't make any difference. We wouldn't win that fight anyway, because centralized systems will always be faster. There's no way to beat that, right? So if you're already operating from a decentralized system, you have to accept the constraints that engineering have imposed on you. And Bitcoiners understand that. We think about this stuff like engineers. And because we understand these trade-offs, because we understand that everything about Bitcoin is about credibility, not convenience, and that we optimize for credibility so that we might make things more convenient with, changes at the fringes and the edges that don't affect the credibility. That same logic applies to election systems. So I was talking with Walter Kern and these guys yesterday, and they were like, that's perfectly said. That's exactly it, right? It's an engineering question and these things. So Americans, right, the number one thing they need to understand in 2024, beyond CBDCs, beyond energy policy and BRICS, and what are you going to do about a runaway federal government and the PSYOPs and they're lying to you, right? None of that stuff matters when you just look at the elections. Did we have an election? We didn't. If you ask a Bitcoiner, does America have elections? The answer is no. We don't have elections. We pretend, right? Just like shitcoins pretend to have finality of transaction on their blockchain, right? Maybe. But is a BSV transaction like a transaction? If a transaction happens on a shit chain, did it happen, right? No, of course not. Bitcoiners understand that, right? If a shitcoin transacts in an empty forest with no nodes and hash rate, it did not fall. We know the answer to the question, right? If there's no hash rate, it didn't fall. Or if it did, there's no confirmation. We don't know, right? You can't verify, because verifying is more important than trusting, right? So Bitcoiners understand, and you're going to hear a lot of this at Nashville in July. We understand the US did not have elections in 2020. We probably didn't have them in 2016. We probably didn't have them in 2012. We probably haven't had elections in the way that Bitcoiners would think of reconciling a database for a long time. It's been a long time, right? I don't know when. I don't know when we stopped, but we haven't had one in a long time. Cities, I'll argue, haven't had elections in 60, 70 years. No elections. We haven't had elections, right? So now people have voted. That's not the same as having elections. Voting and having an election are not the same. You can spend money, right? You could blow cash. You can blow a shitcoin. If someone gives you something for it, you spent it, right? But did you have a transaction? I don't know, right? I don't think the answer is yes. Bitcoin Graffiti says, and Bitcoin only has value because we use it precisely. Now, the other things that are out there, their value is speculation or whatever you want to call it, right? But at least in Bitcoin, we understand a transaction happened. If a Bitcoin transaction happens and the miners all see it, it happened. That's literally what we're betting on all the time, every day, when we buy Bitcoin, when we use Bitcoin, when we think in Bitcoin, when we refer to Bitcoin. So now that we have this, I think that our role in 2024 is the greatest role in the election, to help Americans understand what the hell is going on with our elections. Now, again, do not do the Rudolph Giuliani, who I love. We love Mayor Giuliani, right? He's a cool guy. But he's sitting there trying to tell you this person had a box of stuff and then and the girl that he went after in Georgia, I mean, there's no crimes against her. There's nothing, right? You don't think there'd be a crime against her if someone had actual proof that she scammed an election? Now, I believe people scammed, right? I believe it happened. 100% it happened. People scammed the elections, but doesn't mean the election was a scam because of that, right? To me, the election was a scam because we can't audit it. And if you can't audit it, did you have it? I don't think we did. I don't think we had an election. We have a president. We didn't have an election. So the rest still needs to come to the conclusion. Yeah. So where we're at now from these policies, we can start to make predictions with these people and policies and predictions. And it looks like Bitcoin is the lens through which most Americans will end up viewing the 2024 election. And it is the way to make sense, right? In the same way that I used Bitcoin as the organizing principle around NPC management, you can use Bitcoin as the organizing principle around the election. And if we follow this sort of path, Bitcoiners are going to be like RFK, the kingmakers of 2024 elections. And I can't wait. Let's see what the folks on Rumble are saying. Rumblers. What are they rumbling about over there? We love our Rumble fans. All right. Freedom lovers, indeed. Good afternoon, Sluggo. How's it, Drew Hadley? Things are going well. Talk about discussion between Vance, Vivek, Massacre, and others. Yeah. Roy Cup, good morning. UK, and thus far haven't found anyone to talk Bitcoin with. Seems like it's all about crypto or only interested in buy-sell prices. Do you know any good groups or co? Well, Roy if you went by the Craig Wright law case today, you might meet a couple of cool Bitcoiners there. What's the over under? But I believe there's probably a good Bitcoin meetup, right? In London. I bet Roy Cup you'll find something good there. Just look for Bitcoin meetup. Right? Lance asks, what's the over under on how much longer the Swift Kelce tie-up will last? I don't know. We're gonna keep tracking it, right? Now he's Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan. Was anyone else around in the 90s? Do you know what the Michael Jordan thing was like? Okay, it wasn't Travis Kelce, like, get a shot. He kicked everyone's ass, and every time he turned on the sports, he was just destroying people because he was so good. Travis Kelce missed, like, I'm told, every pass that was given to him at the end of the game to win the game. It was like set up for him to get the last touchdown. He couldn't hold on to the ball. That's my understanding. All right. I did not watch the sports ball, but that's my understanding. Galting says, NPC news, NG, indeed. Moran says, I forget to care about most of the BS. Apex Locks, have you heard of blockhunter.eu? Is it a scam? Probably. I don't know, though. Also from London. How's the rain today? Very true, Galting says about Singapore, Seoul, Tokyo, all well ahead of any city in the US now. Yeah. Roy Cup says Changi Airport is amazing, but so are others in Japan and China. I mean, I've been to all the airports in Japan. I don't know how they're only okay. I'm not the biggest. I mean, Japan is a little older, just like America. Like Narita is pretty rundown. I've been going there a lot, and the one they revamped, Haneda, Kansai is pretty good. That's true. I've stayed in Kansai before, but I stayed there when it was brand new because they built it for the World Cup in 2002. So I stayed there when it was brand new, and it was awesome. But I went again in recently. My family, my wife's half Japanese, right? So I got a lot of family who live in Osaka. So I do go quite a bit. Royco Cup asks, what's the Citadel thing? I only know the Citadel dispatch. Well, Royco, many Bitcoiners believe we're going to build our own cities, and we call them Citadels. So it's more or less just leaning into the whole rejigging of the economy and starting from fresh and not trying to redo things, but start from scratch. So a lot of Bitcoiners talk about Citadels. It's part of Bitcoin culture. That's where the Citadel name comes from. Matt Odell's thing, right? It's larger than just some references. People have been talking about Bitcoin Citadels for a long time. I think it might come from the sovereign individual even. I know the word citadel is not mentioned in sovereign individual, but the concept of breakaway societies at this time and place in history was something that they referred to in that book, and I think Bitcoiners have just absorbed it. It's a good question. I don't really know where the history of the first citadel talk comes from. I've been talking citadels for a long time, but it's more that I'm interested in these terraformation and cities from scratch and things like that. So much confusion in America, indeed. Jack Maulers said some nice things about Kelce, so I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt for now, though NFL is the biggest fiat shit show going. Yeah, Daniel, no, I'm not an anti-Travis Kelce guy at all. I don't care. I'm not worried about Taylor Swift or Travis Kelce or anything. I just bring it up because it's funny, right? When they say they're not doing it and then they say he's Michael Jordan, it's funny, right? But I have no problem with Travis Kelce whatsoever. I don't think they're ever, by the way, endorsing Biden publicly unless they have blackmail. You'll know, right? If Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce publicly endorse Biden, it's because there's blackmail on them. She's too smart. All right, to put her brand next to a guy who's drooling and is so fucked up that it's obvious. She would be a retard to do that. And every sign is she's abnormally smart about business, right? Abnormally, like not normal person here. Now I don't like her music. I don't even think we're in a world where celebrities matter anymore in politics. We are down to fear and security and wants and needs. We're not, I've often described a moment when America went wrong as the 2020 election, because the 2000 election, the Clinton versus, Gore versus Bush. The reason that I think that election was where we went wrong, not just because we, had a scammed election. It's because the way they agreed on everything had no nuance, showed the uniparty, and Americans just didn't show up. We did not vote in big numbers. We were too celebrating absolute victory of the 90s. No one gave a shit. If you're sick of politics saturating your life now, remember that in that 2000 election, no one even cared. It wasn't even on anyone's radar. 9/11 hadn't happened. We'd invented the internet. The Soviet Union was done. Rock and roll. It was just the funnest 90s. It was amazing, right? Whoever grew up as a kid in that era knows just how awesome it was. Everywhere was a party. Everyone was having fun. No one even talked about politics. It wasn't even on our mind. It just didn't happen, right? So now we were papering over a lot of troubles. I'm not saying life was perfect. I'm saying the perception of life was perfect. So it's in that world, if you still think along those terms, yeah, having George Clooney back you matters because it was a popularity contest. It was just a high school election. I qualify the 2000 election as a high school election. In that the popular kids, you had to be, popular endorsements and da-da-da-da. It continued like that for years. I mean, that's how Obama won too. We got all these popular endorsements. It was a big deal back then. But the world changed so much. And because the economy sucks and everyone's so poor and all this stuff, that and because we are at an existential limit to what the old America can do, the ability for celebrities in this environment to affect people's political choices, I think, is over. I don't think it exists anymore. So I don't really even care if that's their plan. Put it that way. I don't care. Like, they tried her in 2018 midterms in Nashville. She couldn't even pull a senator for Nashville, for Tennessee. Marsha Blackburn, a lady going after the Epstein stuff, Republican, she went directly against him, and it didn't work. Taylor Swift went directly against this woman, and it didn't work. So, and I think she was involved in the Biden campaign in 2022. I mean, who gave a shit? Now, I just don't think they're going to come public at this point, 2024, because, I mean, he's got maggots coming out of his ears, and he's drooling, he's rotting. He's literally rotting in front of us. So if she does, it's because they can blackmail her. If she doesn't, it's exactly as it looks like, right? She doesn't need to. She's getting all this attention and all that. So I don't care about the Travis Kelce thing at all, right? It's just not on my. It's funny to laugh at. That's it. It's not serious, right? I'm not worried about. And I don't even like. Even if I understand, the people, Maulers has a plan to orange pill Taylor Swift. Great, yeah, do it. Right? She's a smart businesswoman. She'll get it, right? But she doesn't change people's political opinions. But it would be awesome to have her, spreading Bitcoin stuff. So I'm the same. I'm not turning my back on these people yet. I could be persuaded to dislike them more, but I don't care. I just don't care. Right? I just like when they when they write that he's Michael Jordan. I wouldn't have done it if they didn't say he was Michael Jordan. Speaking of the 90s, again, remember what it was like. Remember what the Michael Jordan craze in the 90s was like. And then think of Travis Kelce. It's crazy how the banks expect us to sell our real estate at higher prices later on and continue the Ponzi scheme. It's all, yeah, they're done. On the 50K, we are winning big league. We are winning. We are winning. I really need to go to Nihon. Yeah, we love Nihon. Japan, for the uninitiated. That's their own name for themselves. Nihonjin, the Japanese people. All right, that's all I got for today, guys. Let me see if I have one more Rumble quote here. No, we're good. Oh, yeah, thank you. Have a great day. Catch you tomorrow. Hopefully no more. Yeah, Roy, I don't think it was dengue in the end because everyone else on the island caught something similar. So I'm not sure what it was, but it sucked. But I lived. We're good. All right.